All right, welcome to Delayed Offside. Here's a little starter for this one. I want you just to think about three words, if you can, three words that you would use to describe the NHL playoffs so far. Sanjay, you're a wordsmith, a man of few, strong, poignant words. In three words, describe the the NHL playoffs so far. We're already in. Edit.
Overtime. Been a ton of overtime. Fast-paced and exciting.
Ooh, Pilon.
I'll go intense, gritty. I was going to go exciting as well. How about thrilling?
Ooh, I like that. Adam, cap us off.
Okay. Fun.
Holy frick.
Supliferous.
What's that mean?
I don't know.
Exactly, because it's not a word.
He read it in a Dr. Seuss book.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are like...
How do you spell that, Adam?
Yeah. What is it? It's the easiest
Supliferous.
opening bit ever. Three words. I'm going to choose a small word, a fake word, and then I'm going to start sweating. Oh,
the flop sweat setting in, guys.
Okay. It's been unreal. It's been heavy, and it's been like bombshell. Unreal. Like I was hit with, like I watched every game so far, except for the one tonight, Washington and Boston. I kind of clipped in, but like last night, watched them all.
I watched every game except for this one.
Well, yeah, I had my kids, so I couldn't watch it.
Kids, man, it makes all the difference. I'm lucky if I can catch a full game nowadays.
But man, I was like, COVID, and I'm all alone. So like Sunday was like mope on the couch and watch playoff hockey. I weeded a bit. I got rid of a lot of weeds.
He's like, I can't listen to this crap anymore, and he took off.
He said three words. Okay, there was a limit. You're one of those kids.
You're making Ryan depressed.
Yeah, I know. Ryan's.
Sorry, I got sunscreen in my eyes. It was so beautiful. I started tearing up, Adam. The superfluous.
Superfluous.
Where it was just beautiful.
Sake. You know what? I'm going to look it up. Superfluous.
Superfluous.
I feel like you have a word that's almost there, but you have the wrong word. But that didn't go the way I thought it would, even remotely. So with that, let's start the pod. All right, we're going to start finishing off our essentially our playoff preview. If you recall last episode, we got to a point where we covered most of them, but at the time, there were still a couple of things up in the air, whether or not Vegas or Colorado would end up in the first spot and who they'd challenge. Well, that has been decided, and as we speak right now, the Colorado Avalanche are taking on the St. Louis Blues. With a 5-3-0 record against the Blues, the Avalanche averaged about 82 points versus 63. The Blues, once Stanley Cup contenders, kind of limping in across the finish line as the Montreal Canadiens of the USA. And one has to really wonder here how this matchup is going to go, because the Avalanche are the heavy favorite, not only in the playoffs, or in this round, I should say, but for the actual NHL playoffs. This team is looking ready to go. Let's talk about this series and break it down. We'll get thoughts from farthest removed from anything fun resembling hockey, Sanjay Kosh.
Hey man, that game last night between the Flames and Canucks was a barn burner, so don't read us often. If you're watching this tomorrow, when we drop, the Flames are playing at 2:00 Mountain tomorrow against the Canucks, so tune in again. But now to get into other hockey, the less exciting stuff, the playoffs.
If you weren't watching our game last night, you weren't watching hockey.
That's right. We had fisticuffs. We had high scoring, good goaltending. What more do you want from hockey?
It ends so we can have playoffs.
Yeah. I hope it goes like extra long so that the Oilers series gets bumped back. But something happens where there's like a big snowstorm and they can't play the game, so they delay the Oilers game or something.
Talk about the series.
So I think Colorado is a powerhouse team. Like, they haven't had a team like this since the days of Sakic and Forsberg. You look at their offense with McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, Kadri. They're just a stacked team. And St. Louis, you mentioned limping into the playoffs. They really haven't been the same since they won the Stanley Cup. And I mean, they won the Stanley Cup, so you can never take that away from them. But, you got to question if that was just like a super heater where they were like last in the league, then went all the way, won the Stanley Cup. And then even last year, they lost to the Canucks in the first round, and they kind of limped in the playoffs this year. And who knows, next year they may not even make it. So for me, this looks like a very David versus Goliath matchup on paper, which means that the Blues are going to win in 6. But I think Colorado's going to take this one in 5.
Adam, what are your thoughts? Why is it that the Blues should be taken seriously as a potential contender coming out of this round?
Well, they still have a number of players that know how to win, and we're on that team that won the Stanley Cup, whereas with the Colorado Avalanche, they know how to get close, but they don't know how to finish. Now, with the loss of a player like David Perron, that hurts, but you still have Shen, you still have Tarasenko, you still have Parayko on the back end there, you still have Binnington. You've got leadership, you've got guys that have been there, they've danced the dance, they've walked the walk, they've
shoveled that barn of all the manure that's in it.
I wouldn't count that team out.
Who do you have in the series there, Adam?
I have Colorado in 5.
Brian, if you look at the Blues, like we're talking about David Perron, who is essentially like he's a good hockey player. Like I don't think you're ever going to take that away. But if he's your top scorer, does that just show you like the lack of depth the Blues have versus Colorado?
Lack of depth or just lack of elite options, right? Like Tarasenko for the longest time was their top offensive threat, but it just feels like injuries keep derailing his career and just wasn't the same this year. And, you look at trying to match Colorado's elite talent, like you can't, like Sanjay already mentioned, McKinnon, and Landeskog, Kadri, like they're so blessed on forward, but then on defense as well, right? They have probably one of the top pairings in Cale Makar and Devon Taves. And like Cale Makar is almost like another forward out there for you. Like really, he would have won the Norris, I think, had he not gotten injured. And he would have been the top scoring D-man in the league had he not got injured. He was a point per game defenseman. They're just so blessed with offensive talent. And the Blues, at least this year, just not so much. So, they were disappointing this season. I wonder how much they missed the leadership of Pietrangelo, if that was a bit more of a loss than they thought it would be. But, they still have a lot of champions on that team, and I don't think they're going to go down lightly. So I'm going to go Colorado wins.
Awesome too. Yeah.
I'm going to go Colorado wins. I don't see St. Louis being able to topple the Avalanche, but I think they make it a series and they stretch it to 7.
Ooh. If Colorado has a history, they've kind of been a propped up team in the sense that people are always talking about how good this team is for a while now. And their window is definitely opening, if not already open, if not has already been open. And I asked the question, I guess, because this is probably a speculation. There was a period here where the Colorado Avalanche were not nearly performing as hot as people thought they were going to. And some conversation came up about maybe it's time to look for a new coach. If this team does not go to the final, or if this team is trounced out early, let's say second round, third round, is it time for a new coach, or do you hold pat here and let it grow with the team? What say you?
Well, if you try to go on, have a couple kicks at the can and you can't get past the second round, like last year they lost to Dallas, but second round, I thought they should have won that series. Just looking at the two rosters, they lost, and if they lose out, say they lose to St. Louis this time, I definitely think, the coach needs to be looked at, because if he's not able to get it done, there's a lot of other veteran coaches out there that have won in the past, and you could bring him in for a year or two just to get the team over the hump. Sakic has some history with Bob Hartley, who knows how to win, who just won the KHL championship.
You would. Just throwing out old Flames garbage.
Just won the KHL championship, former Jack Adams winner.
Wasn't Hartley a coach in Colorado before?
Hartley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he won the Stanley Cup in 2001.
You're talking about bringing him back?
Of course he would.
Why not?
Of course he would.
Why not? Coaches come back all the time.
Only in Calgary. Oh my
True, it
God.
happens elsewhere.
All right. Well, I'll take the random. You have something to say, Ryan? Your mouth's half open. So
If you have something to add, go ahead, and then I can jump in after.
No, jump ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't think you changed the coach. You just won the President's Trophy. Obviously, yeah, they had a bit of a rough patch, but I think most of that at that time was due to injuries. And this team is elite. I mean, to be honest, this team is as perfect as you can get in the salary cap era. And like, you take a look at all those statistics we listed before, all of them are in green. They're top 10 in like every single category. So, but anything can happen in a first round. You saw what happened to Tampa Bay Lightning against Columbus that one year, when the Tampa Bay Lightning were one of the best teams we had ever seen in the salary cap era during the regular season.
2 years ago, yeah.
Then they lost in the first round, but I mean, they stayed patient and then they won a cup. So I don't think you would want to panic. I think you would stick with it. Know that this is a fantastic team. Playoffs, things happen. It's hockey. It's not the NBA where if you're a top team, you're guaranteed to get to the final. Just because you're the best team doesn't mean you're always going to win. You just have to have enough chances at it to hopefully be able to get there.
So what is the break point then? Is this like if this team becomes like the Boston Bruins of the 90s where they're always in the conversation but can't seem to clinch it? When is your breaking point? When are you saying, okay, these things need to change? Like, I know this is a really theoretical thing because it's Colorado, but these conversations are going to pop up depending how they do this year.
Like, I think go ahead, Adam. I already talked to you. Go.
That was Sanjay.
Oh, Sanjay. Go ahead, Sanjay.
No, go ahead, Phelan. Go ahead.
I was going to say if they underperform, right? If they're underperforming consistently. So, if they lose out this first round and then they go into the regular season next year and they're at the midway point and they are nowhere near that, top level that they should be, maybe at that point you consider it if there's some consistent underperformance.
All right, well, we'll jump to the next one, but I'll make my quick prediction. I'm going to say that the Avalanche sweep this in 4 games.
As you say this, St. Louis is winning 5-0 right now. No, I'm just kidding.
They're winning 1-0. They're winning 1-0.
I know. It's actually the other series that's 5-2 right now, which is
Carolina.
Carolina's
crushing them.
Yeah. We're going to move to our last series that we had to talk about here, which was also up in the air for the potential chance that the Vegas Golden Knights could clinch the President's Trophy. But alas, that was not quite true. Even though the Golden Knights have the better points percentage specifically over the Minnesota Wild actually have the head-to-head matchup here with a 5-1-2 record against them, which is quite surprising. I don't think a lot of people had Minnesota as a team, as a playoff team, or as an offensive team, but their goal .460 shows you that this team is here to play. The power play is remarkably terrible, though, for both of these teams, given the amount of offensive talent that they show. So it's kind of a little bit of a wash. Now, this is already in one game, and the Golden Knights, Marc-Andre Fleury, and the Minnesota Wild's Cam Talbot essentially had a goaltending duo with Minnesota coming up on top in the overtime period. This is looking a little bit like that's going to be the difference maker come to these games. What are your thoughts on this matchup? Is this, even though Minnesota has the lead right now in the series, is that how this is going to roll out, or is that just a early drop from the Knights not having some of their best players? Adam, we'll take your thoughts on this.
Well, I think that this is such a closely matched first round matchup that it's going to go 7 games. The goaltending's fantastic. We know what Talbot can do when it comes to playoff time. We saw it with the Oilers. I would have liked to see him, not be cheated against with the old pad pull. A little pissed about that still back against the Ducks. But, he's a good goalie. But Marc-Andre Fleury is scary. He's got 3 Stanley Cups. He's gotten the Penguins there once. He paved the road for them another time when Murray came back after an injury. He's a big game goaltender.
And he's having the best season he's ever had this season.
I got to say, he will go down as one of the greatest goaltenders of all time. And he'll be in those.
Marc-Andre Fleury?
This is actually one of the questions for later, to be honest.
Absolutely, yes. Look at what he did last night. And also count the rings and kiss him, Sanjay, because look what the Penguins are without him. They're not as good.
He won one as a starter.
What?
Didn't he only win one as a starter?
I'm sorry. My 2 Stanley Cup ring are plugging my ear.
There'd only be one plugging his ear. His other one would be wide open.
No. Still on the team. He still gets a ring.
So he won one as a starter.
Yeah.
Won one as a backup. Won the second as part-time. He got them past the first 2 rounds. And
he got them that far, but he was the backup when they won the cup.
Yeah, and that's not I don't think that's fair to say he was backup that year because he put that team on his
Was he in net for the Stanley Cup final? No, he's backup. I think that's the definition. If you're not in net, you're the backup, aren't you?
Yeah, he lost the starting role to Murray at like halfway through those playoffs.
And how bad of a goaltender do you have to be to lose your job to Matt Murray? Just kidding.
Murray came back and they just went to Murray.
No, they didn't. Marc-Andre kept the net, and he had a really bad start to that series.
Did he? Okay.
And they tipped it over to Matt Murray.
But how many times has he been to the Stanley Cup final? Really?
As a starter?
The year before, that's 4. The year before, they won.
He's got 5 Stanley Cup appearances.
Exactly. That you can't tell me. He's not one of those.
That's not a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence at all.
But back to the Golden Knights, because that's what we're actually talking about right here, you guys.
Right.
Just so you know.
Okay, so the fact that I don't like Max Pacioretty has me with the Wild edging the Vegas Golden Knights out in Game 7.
Interesting. I also have this going 7 games, but I'm going to give it to Vegas. Vegas is almost a perfect team like Colorado, except for their power play, which you saw they're brutal at for some reason. But still, I mean, they basically outclassed Minnesota in every category. But yeah, Minnesota's had their number this regular season. And you know what? They have a deeper forward group than Vegas. So I think they're going to give Vegas all they can handle. But at the end of the day, I think Vegas has the better defense. As Adam has mentioned, the better goaltending. And they might not be as deep as forward, but I think their elite players are more elite than Minnesota's for forward. So I think they take it in 7.
Interesting. I'm going to go Minnesota in 6. And I think Vegas, they have a problem scoring in the playoffs. You look at back to last year against Vancouver, Demko almost set the record. Like he was shutting them out almost every single game that he was playing in that second round. And it carried over to game 1 of this round where they lost 1-0. They couldn't get one by Cam Talbot, Flames legend over there. So to me, I think Vegas, their power play isn't very good. And Minnesota, I think, they're just like a pesky team. They know how to win. They were clawing their way in. They were out for most of the year. And they got in, they battled their way in, whereas Vegas has been sitting pretty for a long time. They knew they're going to be in the playoffs for the last couple of weeks, so they didn't have to scratch and claw in, whereas Minnesota is playoff tested, they're battle ready, and I think they're going to show it, and I think they're going to take it in 6.
But I would say Vegas was fighting for that President's Trophy. I don't think they just,
it's not really like a fight. It's like
they played pretty good hockey down the stretch. Didn't they win like 6-0 their final game in the regular season?
They also had a game where they sat a ton of their lineup because of cap constraints. Actually, they had to do it.
Well, that was all season.
Yeah.
Their players must be just loving the playoffs. Like, oh my God, I can actually rest for a regular amount of time in this game.
that effectively cost them the President's Trophy, though.
Oh, for sure.
Realistically,
they played with how many players? Was it 15?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So. Like, imagine that, how tired you would be.
Yeah, people were tweeting like beer hockey teams play with more players than that.
But I guess the question comes here, so we know Vegas is kind of it's an anomaly in the league. It's when it came into the league, its playoff window opened automatically, and that was a shock to everyone. And since then, they've been taking pieces out and adding better, flashier pieces in, not necessarily done with keeping their assets in the best way, if you think about like what they traded away for things or what they gave up. But at the end, you have to wonder, is Vegas's year now? Like, is this their year next year? Like, how long does this window have left? I know people are talking about how Boston still got its window open. I don't know how open that window is anymore, but how open is Vegas's window, would you say?
I just want to look at I'm just looking at their roster and the age of all their players
and the contracts.
Yeah. while I'm doing that, someone else can chime in.
Well, I really think their window is probably pretty wide open. If you look at the division next year for Vegas, you got Edmonton, which is another playoff team, which we don't know how they're going to be next year. And then you got a bunch of teams that didn't make the playoffs. So they have Vancouver, Phoenix, LA, San Jose, Calgary, Anaheim. And so when you look at that division, you project through the next 3 years. I don't see them missing the playoffs those times. And depending
is Arizona going to be in that division though? Or are they pushed over?
I think Arizona flipped over.
I think
Arizona flipped over. Oh yeah, because Seattle's in it, right?
Yeah,
I forgot about
they're going to be moving. Yeah.
Okay, well, Seattle, like, who knows how they're going to be, right? So
the projected teams do not look very good for Seattle.
No,
like versus, but neither did Vegas. In fairness, it's not like any of us were like, "Whoa, Jonathan Marchia show." Wow,
Riley Smith,
a grab.
James Neal. No. so for me, I think their window's going to be pretty open. Like they're going to be making playoffs year after year, and when you come to the trade deadline, depending who's available, they could pick up a piece for a rental and make a run here. So I think they have a couple years left. So I wouldn't be worried about them.
That's what I mean, though. Like if you look at they had some elite players as part of their core, not core, I shouldn't say, but like their foundation moving forward, guys like Suzuki and so forth, and they've partied with most of those guys. Like, so one has to wonder how much that plays into it. We'll talk a little bit more about Marc-Andre Fleury later, but I think the thing that's caught a lot of people off here is that Minnesota has been as good as it has been. That was so awful way of saying that, but they've been really good. And I don't think anyone expected them to be that good considering what they were like last year. Like they were not nearly the team that they were this year. They're way more dynamic. They're way faster. And with Vegas having cap constraints moving forward, I think there's a lot of, I guess that's not really the same thing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for change and upset and everything else moving here. I know cap doesn't play into playoffs, but I think just in general, those situations I think cause problems throughout the year. So I'm going to take a shot and say, I'm going to say Vegas I'll go 6. I do think Minnesota will be a tough out though.
Yeah, I think so too. And in terms of their window, so I was just looking at cap friendly. I would say they still have at least a few years with their window wide open. So most of their star players are late 20s. There's a few in their early 30s, but like very early 30s. And they don't have a lot of UFAs coming up in the next, like big name UFAs coming up for at least another 3 years. Like Riley Smith's in 2 years, but everyone else is 3 years or more for their contract. So I think they're looking pretty good for the foreseeable future.
That's good.
But in terms of cap constraints, obviously they're right up against it.
We're going to jump next to a little bit of a discussion of the playoffs that occurred already. So we have some series that are already a little bit underway. Capitals Boston is now tied up 1-1. The Panthers lost to the Lightning, so they're down 1-0. Carolina is now taking a lead in its series. The New York Islanders in overtime defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins. And what am I blanking on? Which one am I missing here?
Washington and Boston.
I already said that one. That was the first one I started with that. Thanks for listening.
You're missing.
I'm missing one of them.
One of the teams is playing and winning or losing.
So I don't know who's watching this anyways. Let's say, what are your thoughts? Like, so we talked a little bit at the internet, but what are your thoughts on the first round so far on some of the matches? Let's start with Boston and Washington. What were your thoughts on those two games so far? If you got to watch it today or not?
I think that one for sure was in my expectations was it's going to be tight, and I'm surprised it's as high scoring as it's been. In terms of 2-2, 3-2, I knew it was going to be a battle, and that was one I was really excited to watch, and it has been so far. And both games have gone overtime. Both have had TJ Oshie with the assist with that shot from the blue line for the OT winner. Like that to me was like, oh man, that's the way that game should have ended. Like he just lost his father like a week or two ago and hit that. Like that was touching. And then of course this one ends with Brad Marchand hitting the OT winner. So like it's perfectly laid out in storybook land here.
And of course, Tom Wilson gets the very first goal of the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very well laid out. I have to say, for that series, I've been very impressed with Washington. I was expecting Boston to control play just because of how good they are defensively, and that's kind of, their bread and butter is controlling possession, especially on 5-on-5. And that first game, Washington outshot them pretty bad. They were playing really well, and at least that first game, they kept that perfection unit, that perfection line to zip. I don't think they had any points that first game, so I was very impressed with Washington. In today's game, it was a lot more even, but again, Boston wasn't really controlling it. It was more 50-50.
What do you guys think about Kelly Rudy's comments on the goaltender getting hurt off the shot about not stretching? So, like, I feel like the DeBrusk scored that goal, but he was out of position on it for sure and reached across and then was injured. But what do you think about, one, what Kelly Rudy said, and two, what Kelly Rudy said? What do you guys think about it?
I was shocked because Kelly Rudy is kind of one of those guys that's very forgiving to players and very kind in that way. And I don't know if he had a pin on his seat, but I was shocked when he's like, well, he's not going to want to hear this, but like he should have been ready.
Gotta be stretching, man.
Like, oh man, I was like, whoa, Kelly Rudy just roasted him. So I was shocked actually, but it was kind of nice to see that kind of side of Kelly Rudy, to be completely honest, as an analyst and as a former goaltender, right? At the same time, that guy stretched out. Like, I think that would have hurt anybody.
Yeah, it was a little uncalled for. And I normally like Kelly Rudy. I think he's a great guy. He does a lot of the Flames play-by-play, and you're right, he is very forgiving, especially this year. He could have roasted the Flames, and he hasn't. So
I don't think he's allowed to as the commentator.
Well, he saved up all his anger watching the Flames, and he unloaded on the Capitals. So I was surprised to hear those comments. I thought they're a little bit offside from him. And
you hear his flub up,
but maybe they're true. Like you're saying, Rudy's not really usually a guy to roast players. And I mean, he would know, he's a former goalie himself. Maybe there's some truth to it.
But if you listen to it a little slower, he does say, like, Markstrom didn't stretch out perfectly.
Markstrom?
Yeah. Flames. It's his way of roasting them.
Oh.
Yeah. Good God. See ya.
I love those jokes that have to be explained. Those are the best jokes.
The best part of the joke is hearing it the second time.
Where it makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. Let's jump to a different series here. This one was kind of a magical series in a certain way, because the Pittsburgh Penguins have essentially, in Sidney Crosby's career, only missed the playoffs once his first year, which is a stat I was really surprised about. I actually thought they'd missed the 1 year, but it was actually that they were out in the first round under their former coach before Mike Sullivan took over. But the fact that the Penguins have kind of had this consecutive run, and they step in against very defensive-minded New York Islanders, where the Pens are the favorite. The Islanders ended up taking the game in overtime with a score of 4-3. Are we shocked by this development that the Islanders won that first game? Or does it change your opinions on the series, and who do you think wins it?
I'm a little bit worried just because of how the Penguins goaltending was that game. Mm-hmm. If you go back and look at all four of those goals that the Islanders scored, most NHL goalies, they'll make that stop. And if they had an average NHL starting netminder in there, they would have won that game 3-1. So for them to lose it, and goaltending confidence, it builds on you. So now all the pressure's on their goaltending for game 2. I'm a little bit worried. I'm not going to change my prediction. I still think Pittsburgh wins, but I think this might be a longer series than I had thought.
Yeah, there was a lot of flack on there about Jari's glove hand and some of those goals getting scored, specifically the last one there between his head and the post. But I will point out, and I think this is important, he has not had a great season. He's had streaks where he's been good, but they have not had good goaltending this year, and they still ended up first in the East.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jerry ended up, I believe it was a 909, which just is a little below average. But when he started the season, it was 8. I can't remember what it was. It was horrible. It was brutal. Something.
It was not the starter. He played himself out of the starting position at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did turn the season around. So, I mean, that game was early season Tristan Jarry for sure. And the other issue for Pittsburgh is they can't fall back on Casey DeSmith because he's out. And Casey DeSmith has had actually a really good season. He had a 926 or something like that. Don't quote me on the exact number, but it was very impressive numbers from Casey DeSmith, but they can't turn to him right now. So they have to rely on Tristan Giari. So, I mean, he's got to rebound or else it could be over quick. And the other thing I would say is, I mean, we were talking about Cal Palmieri and how the Islanders brought him in to help with the offense after losing Anders Lee, and he hadn't really produced over the regular season. He produced in that game. And so, I mean, if he gets hot and he gets going and he starts clicking with this team, that could be dangerous for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's almost like it's hard to hate on a trade where you automatically you win a playoff game because of that person. Like, yeah, that's a big accomplishment there. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I thought that for a team that played defensive style hockey, it was actually a much more exciting game than I thought it would be, because I really do feel like the Islanders are like, they will choke the life out of hockey. Like it's the devil's hockey. It's just not fun. It's boring. It's very lockdown defensive. It's not offensive at all. And that's why I really felt it was good if somebody like an offensive team like Pittsburgh beats them. But that game, they couldn't keep the puck out of their own net. And there was actually a lot of breakaways in that game for a defensive minded team and a veteran sounded team for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed when I came back, like I'd gotten up and I hurt my knee. Kelly Rudy.
No, but I saw you sitting there doing this.
Oh, it hurt. Oh my God. Kelly Rudy would roast me.
Lower body injury day to day on the podcast.
Yeah, way to let us all down, Adam. What about you two? Does it change your opinion of where this series ends up now that the Islanders are in charge? Or did anybody pick the Islanders to win? I can't remember.
No, it is one game though. But it's a scary one game. Because I honestly, like it's one of those ones where you're like, oh my God, I picked Pittsburgh, but this might just turn out to go the other way.
Pittsburgh did get trounced out pretty early last round. They really didn't have much answers towards Carey Price and the Montreal Canadiens, which was a huge surprise to me.
How long is Malkin out for? Do we know?
I don't, but there's actually a lot of injuries going into this playoffs now that you bring that up. Like Malkin's out, we know Perron's out with COVID, Pacioretty's out. Like those aren't exactly like small names, No. Those are big players to be missing. And Malkin's career is starting to tail off a little bit, it looks like. I don't think he's quite where he was even 2 years ago. So, but I do think they would definitely miss him for sure.
Well, yeah, he still produces when he plays. It's just he doesn't play that often because he's always hurt.
That used to be what they said about Crosby.
Yeah, but Malkin's been more consistent. Like how many 82-game seasons has he actually played in his career?
I don't have it.
Not a lot.
Probably one.
We haven't done a bet in a while. How about Sanjay and Adam Betts? And I find out that number.
I can't.
I don't even know, man. I can't even. I'm stepping away from this one.
Cowards.
That's fine. I'm going to look it up anyways.
You know what? I want to go in on that $5 bet.
All right, Baron.
Oilers games, so I'm holding that money.
Right. Okay. What?
How many seasons do you think he had a full 82-game season?
Malkin?
Yeah.
3.
Adam?
1.
The answer is 2.
Oh.
Split.
So you each send each other $2.50.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll e-transfer you tonight, Adam.
Okay.
We already talked a bit about Vegas and the Wild, so I don't want to talk much more about them, but I do want to jump down to the series, which is like the soup du jour of the NHL playoffs. The series I think most of us were looking forward to, and the series that really paid off and was probably the best hockey I've seen in forever, to be honest with you, which was the Florida Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like this series had it all. It had fast action, it had hard hits, it had great shots, it had dirty hits, it had fights, it just had everything. Like if you wanted a crash course into like hockey, that was the series. That's crazy because these two teams, someone's going home, and it's too bad because whoever moves on is going to be electrifying or crippled So I really don't know. So let's break down some of the stuff in the series. What are things that surprised us about this series so far, and what are things that I don't know stand out? Let's go with you, Ryan.
I would say the number one thing was how quickly Kucherov came back to being Kucherov. Like, it did not take him as long as I thought it would for him to get up back to game speed. In our last podcast, I suggested it may take him a couple games. It took him a couple periods. That's that's all it took. He got 3 points in that game. And boy, I mean, that's dangerous, bringing in a superstar of his caliber, and he's firing on all cylinders already.
Yeah. Yeah, I the intensity and the hatred between the teams is beautiful for playoff hockey. The hits were incredible. There were a number of dangerous hits, and the amount of scrums within the game, like, it's like every stoppage of play, there were guys like grabbing everyone by the teeth, and like it was awesome. And it's weird to see people in the stands. Really weird to see people in the stands right now.
It makes me sad that there's going to be no fans in the stands for the Canadian games, because it just adds such a different element to it. And it's going to be hard to go back to watching no fans in the stands after seeing some of these games.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a big detriment to the Canadian teams. I mean, you look at the way the crowd pumped up the Panthers, and if you're not used to that, you're going into the third round, and say Toronto has to play the Panthers in the third round, the momentum swings and the way the crowd can get into the game being against the Leafs. I don't think they haven't played all year. They haven't played 2 years, like a year and a half with fans in the stands. So I don't think they're prepared for that. So that's a huge disadvantage to the Canadian teams.
I don't know if I buy that. Like,
don't think so?
I think playing in front of another crowd and them getting pumped up might be effective. But I mean, these guys have been playing in front of crowds their entire life. Like, you stop riding a bike for a year, you don't forget how to ride a bike. Like,
says you.
Yeah, it's not my fault you can't remember.
You don't think they feed off the crowd like the home teams?
No, that's not what I said. What I said is that it won't be intimidating to the other team because they'll have played in front of crowds before their entire lives.
I was just thinking, like, the team that they play against. So let's say if it's Florida, like Sanjay said, they'll have, when they're at home, they'll have their crowd to help pump them up and get them motivated. Whereas Toronto won't have that at their home games.
Do the Blue Jays have fans in their stadium for games?
No,
they're not playing in Canada.
Yes, they do.
Do they?
They have fans in their stadium for games, which means wherever they play, which is going to be the weird thing to kind of figure out where the Canadian teams are going to play. If there's fans there, then fans will find them. Like, I really think they will. I don't know that they'll sell out like 9,000, which is a sad sellout number nowadays, but it's actually a really good number. But I think fans will still find teams. Like, you'll still see your dart guy with his dart hanging out of his mouth, except that he won't get to go because they'll be trounced in the first or second round.
Well, I think 9,000 to a Panthers game is better than some regular season games they've had in recent years. So good on them.
It's true, but honestly, like, the Panthers are dynamic, and this is the best thing to help grow them. But honestly, if they don't get past Tampa, it probably doesn't help that market anymore, really, does it?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think there's an inherent pressure on those Southern American teams to perform that Canadian teams don't really get. Like, if you're the Leafs, no matter what happens, you're going to sell out. You could, miss the playoffs for 10 years and you're going to sell out 41 games. If you're the Panthers or you're the Lightning or the Hurricanes, you don't have that luxury. You have to perform every year because everyone likes to go see a winner, whereas Canadian teams will go no matter what. It's kind of detriment to the Canadian teams.
Do you think then with this series that this, with this level of hate and everything else, like, does whoever walk out of here better for the series, or are they going to come out of here damaged? Like, what do you guys think? Is this series, like, it's a great series, but is it good for the winner to go through this adversity like this, or is it going to be like when St. Louis beat the Blackhawks a few years ago and they just had nothing in the next round?
I think that might be the case, especially if every game is like that and say it goes 7 games. That's a Royal Rumble that not many people can, get juice from. Depends on how much time is in between that last game and the next series. You gotta be going into that locker room being like, we need to sweep these guys. We need to, in order to get the rest we need, because this is going to hurt us.
So we're talking about the series, but there's a couple of things that I think I want to cover that has to do with this. And some of these are a little bit bigger and some of these a little bit smaller, but there's two really main points I want to take from this series that I think go beyond specifically the series and apply to things outside of it as well, like the NHL and more than that. First one, Sam Bennet has received a 1-game suspension for his hit on, what did he hit? I'm trying to remember. It doesn't matter. But for his hit from behind, and we'd kind of talked about this in the group chat. Like, some people are like, well, it's not that he didn't get suspended for a game, but the other hit should have been suspended as well. So, because there was a lot of heavy hits in here. I think it was McDonough hit Declare very early on, and it was a penalty call, but there was no subsequent conversation about that, even though we hit him right in the numbers. What do you see as the difference between these two hits specifically, and should both have been punished, or should Sam Bennett's have been punished more? We'll go to Sam Bennett fans, super fans, Sanjay here for this breakdown of this play.
Yeah, I think it's a little unfair for Sam Bennett. I think 100% should have been suspended. That was an unnecessary hit. I think Sam Bennett knows that. He ran like full steam into the guy from behind. You can't be doing that. Doesn't matter if it's the playoffs. You can't. It's just not called for. But Tampa has had several dirty hits as well that only one of them got called. The hit on Duclair, there was a knee-on-knee that was very dangerous. And I seem to recall Edler getting a suspension when he needed a Maple Leafs player. Yet this one here looked identical to me, and no penalty, not even a 2-minute penalty. And there was a late hit on Barkov as well. No penalty called, nothing. So for Sam Bennett to get the only suspension, I'm fine with him getting suspended. I think that's right. Maybe even a couple games because it was so blatant and dangerous. But you can't just do that and then turn a blind eye to everything that Tampa was doing, which in my opinion was just as dangerous. Like, I can't remember who got hit on Florida, but that player could have been seriously injured. Like, that was not a clean hit at all. And he could have been gone. No, the knee on knee. I can't remember who. Yeah. And the Duclair hit as well was super dangerous. The guy had his back turned. He got cross-checked by the numbers into the boards. Looked pretty similar to what Sam Bennett did. Not quite as intense, but I still think he should have been suspended. If Sam Bennett got a suspension, I think then the Lightning should have got a suspension as well.
Bennett's hit was way, way worse. Like, Sam Bennett charged from the middle of the ice and actually laid him out in the numbers. Whereas McDonough, it was like, if you look at it, it was really more of a push from behind into the boards. It wasn't even a hit.
It was a cross check. He cross checked.
No, I thought it was a cross check, but I watched it again. It was actually a one-hand push.
One-hand push?
It was.
I don't.
It wasn't. He didn't even have his stick like this. He had his stick in this hand, and he pushed like this. Maybe it's 2-hand. I don't know, but pushed him, and into the boards he went. So I mean, it was dirty. It was definitely worth the penalty. I'm not sure if it's.
Is that a Lightning jersey you're wearing?
I'm just trying to take it off here. No, like, Bennett's was way worse. Bennett's was way more dangerous. There was more speed involved. It was an actual body check to the back against the boards. McDonald's was really, it was dirty. It was definitely worth the penalty. But it was a push. It was a push from behind into the boards. Dangerous play. It was like at a dangerous location away from the boards to be doing that kind of play.
You're saying they were dangerous for something you don't think is that bad.
It's like I said, it's worth a penalty. I mean, if Bennett only gets 1 game, then there's no way he gets suspension. Like, if Bennett got like 3 games, then maybe you can argue McDonough would get 1 game or something like that. But I mean, if you're comparing the two, Bennett only gets 1 game for that vicious hit. How do you suspend McDonough for a push into the boards? I don't see it. But again, it's hard with the Department of Player Safety to really get a sense as to what is suspension or what's worthy of suspension and what's not. Should that hit by Bennett have been more, and then you could should McDonald's have been maybe worth 1? Maybe that's worth an argument. But I mean, I'm done trying to guess as to what the suspensions are. So I'm just looking at the 2 plays side by side and saying Bennett's is way worse. He got 1, so why should McDonough get 1?
All right, well, we'll move on then here. So the other thing that I think stands out from this series that's been like a talking point or something of interest is the fact that star player for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Nikita Kucherov, goes on season-ending surgery in December. In fact, he doesn't actually get his surgery at the end of last season, but he waits, gets it in December, misses the entire season, giving his team cap relief, allowing them to not have to trade away any of their star players and allow them to keep their dynasty, or not dynasty, but their team together. Not a dynasty yet, to keep this team together. And then miraculously on the first day of playoffs, he's at 100%, first day that he's healthy, to really play with this team. And if he had come back at this time, they would have a cap hit of something like $90 million. Thus, they are able to essentially pick up a super weapon in the last bit and really change the look of their team moving forward here. So the question I have for you is even though this was all legal, what do you think about this move, bringing him back after the season? Is this something that the league should look at and try to find a way to close, or is this just really good on Tampa Bay for running these methods?
That's loophole heaven for Tampa Bay. And, if that's what you can do and get away with, do it. But at the same time, who's walking out of that series? That's, we covered that before. But you gotta wonder, someone's going to be hurt, and it's probably going to be Stamkos.
Ryan, what do you think about what they did? Or Sanjay, sure. Go ahead. Sorry, Sanjay. Brian's on his computer again.
Well, it is a loophole, and, on one hand, I don't like it. But on the other hand, if your team's good enough that you can make the playoffs without your best forward, and have a fairly good regular season, then, hey, more power to you. Who am I to say, could other teams have done it? How would Colorado have done if McKinnon wasn't playing and then they allocated his salary cap? Or how would Edmonton have done if McDavid wasn't playing and they had $12 million in other players, and then all of a sudden McDavid's back for game one in the playoffs, right? So if you could do that, it's a gamble because, they could have missed the playoffs.
I mean, Tampa's not the first team to do this. I was trying to find out. I remember Chicago did this. I couldn't remember the player.
Chicago did this for Patrick Kane.
Was it
the difference was Patrick Kane did not miss the entire season. Mm-hmm. He was injured before the trade deadline. They made acquisitions using his LTIR, right, and then he came back in the first game. We're talking about a guy who missed the entire season and then miraculously, after the season's done, is ready to play. Yeah. And as you said, did not take long. And I think that's often the counterpoint between those two things.
Right.
Tarasenko was gone and he came back, right? But Tarasenko was not the man he was. And whereas Kucherov is very much still the man.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm surprised at your guys' stance on this. I actually kind of thought it would be a lot different.
You thought we'd be against it?
I did actually. I thought somebody would be against it, but to me, I think it's dirty as hell.
It is for sure.
If you cannot, how do you not argue that this is cap circumvention? If cap circumvention is essentially not something that's supposed to happen, how do you argue that it's not cap circumvention when, you're telling me he wasn't ready 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? That part seems, if he'd come back end of the first round, maybe the second, that seems a little more likely to me. But to come back in the first round on the first game, that seems fishy, doesn't it?
It is, very much so.
I think everyone knew right at the beginning of the season what Tampa was doing. It was no surprise.
Oh, agreed.
Everyone, their guess date as to when he'd be healthy was exactly start of the playoffs. We're okay, obviously we know what they're doing here. So I don't know. I mean, how can you be upset with Tampa for twisting the rules to fit their team? If you're going to be upset at anyone, be upset at the NHL for allowing this type of stuff to happen. I'm not upset at Tampa for doing whatever they can to get an advantage.
So I guess my question is do you think the NHL should find a way to close this loophole?
Yeah, I think they should. I don't think it's necessarily fair for a team to be able to do this. And I think it'd just be as simple as, a player has to play at some point in the season. Wouldn't that potentially fix it? I mean, again, the whole trade deadline thing could, people could still take advantage of that. And, I think I think the Leafs took advantage of that too with like Freddie Anderson and some of their other players. Like all of a sudden Freddie Anderson's okay to come back once like Zach Hyman gets hurt. Like I think there were a few teams who were playing around with the cap post trade deadline. So you're still going to have that, but at least maybe you wouldn't be able to sit in a player for an entire season. Although really, this is the first time something like this has ever happened. I mean, how many teams are really going to want to sit a superstar all season just to be able to bring them back in the playoffs like this? Like, I think the circumstances just align perfectly that, like, I don't doubt that Kucherov had a major surgery and he would have been out for a really, really long time. And, he was definitely better before the playoffs, but it was probably close enough that, they were able to get it to work for them.
But he delayed it, right?
Well, I mean,
delayed surgery because
he's in Florida and COVID was pretty high back then in December, right? So maybe it wasn't so much of him making that decision, but the healthcare system down there.
They're just justifying it.
No, like it was very smart by Tampa because everyone was talking about how they'd have to shed, like they try to get rid of Tyler Johnson. They couldn't drop his contract. People were like, oh crap, we're going to have to lose Cirelli or Palat or like who's Tampa going to have to get rid of to be able to get under the cap? And they were all up in arms, and all of a sudden, magically, this Kucherov thing happens, and they're able to make it all fit.
Doesn't mean this team shouldn't exist. Like theoretically, like it shouldn't exist in the sense that it can't exist, but they did this the way they did it, and now this team is a $90 million cap hit team going into the playoffs. Like I just think that's crazy. Like Sanjay, do you think they should close the loophole, or are you fine with it being open?
No, I think they should close it, but
everyone's like, great job, close this, end it.
It's a great job by Tampa. That's what I'm saying. Like Tampa was smart. Like it was brilliant by Tampa, and like why not do it to be able to keep all your players? But in terms of like, should they be allowed to do this? No, because it's not fair. They have a superstar coming back, one of the best players in the league that cost them $0 against the cap this season. So. I mean, it's not fair for the rest of the teams for sure.
Okay, we're going to jump into our final segment here, which is like our roundup segment. So it's essentially like a little bit of a question period / be a GM, whatever. But I planned this out thinking that this would be a short episode, and we're almost an hour in here. So the first question is, there's been plenty of talk online about how weak the North Division is. Do you agree? And do Canadians stand a chance in the semifinal, let alone the Cup? Let's take each of your opinions and fast a little bit why, but not anything too deep. Go ahead.
I disagree. I think the North has better defense than what people are thinking out there. And what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was, do they stand a chance in the semifinals or the Cups?
Yes, of course they do. Yeah.
I would say it depends how you want to view a division this week. If you view it as there's not a lot of Cup favorites in the division, then yeah, it's a weak division. If you're looking at it as, are there a lot of walkover teams in the division? Then I would say, no, it's not.
Yeah, I would agree. Not a weak division at all. Calgary didn't even make the playoffs, and they would have made the playoffs in every other division. So it was definitely not a weak division. And in terms of if the Canadian teams have a shot, depends who makes it. If Winnipeg and Montreal makes it, yeah. But if Toronto and Edmonton make it, then no, they have no shot.
It's funny because there's all this talk, like all this hatred for the North Division, it being easy for when it comes to Matthews and McDavid's points, etc. But I think it is a strong one. But man, I watched some of these teams in these playoffs, like Tampa, Washington, and Boston, and they look like they're playing a level of hockey that I don't know that I've seen in any game in the North Division this year. Like, it doesn't matter who walks out of the North. You're telling me that if Ovechkin is going full speed leveling guys, that there's someone to really counter that on any of these teams? I don't know that there is. Like,
we'll have to see the first games of the playoffs this year, right?
That's also true.
I mean, we didn't watch any American game. I didn't watch any American games during the regular season, so I doubt they were playing to this intensity.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I haven't seen it, but like I'm looking at where they've amped up to, and I'm like, man.
I listened to, I don't know if you listened to that interview with Sam Bennet on 31 Thoughts the other day, but they asked Bennet, they're like, so there's a lot of talk about people saying like the North doesn't play defense. And they're like, can you comment on that? And he's like, well, I'm in this new division. He's like, and I've got over double the amount of points I did when I played in the North Division. So yeah. they play defense.
I was talking to someone about this, and they were saying that there's an article about how Sam Bennett was treated differently by the Panthers than the Flames, like how they did all these different things with him that the Flames didn't do, and how his production has just shot off. So I can't remember all the points, but some of them was like he's the second line center on a team. He's playing with a top line.
They tried Bennet on one of the top lines though.
But
they
never
put Bennet
long.
on the top
He
line.
would get like a game.
Not for long. Yeah.
It was just a game, Sanjay.
It was a couple games, and he got 2 goals his opening game, and then they kind of stopped after 5 games. But I mean, Calgary doesn't have a Huberdeau, right? Like Sam Bennett's playing with Huberdeau, and you look at the game last night, he was tremendous, and Bennett picked up 2 assists, and one of them he didn't have to do very much, and the other one he made a nice pass. So, I think I'm super impressed with the way Florida handled this, and I think Joel Quenneville deserves a lot of credit for turning this guy's career around.
Question 2, was it smart for the Canadians to send Gallagher and Price to Laval / the AHL to get in some games here, or was that like a dumb move / dangerous move on their part?
Dumb / dangerous.
Why?
Well, you're playing, like, he's going down there. You're playing guys that are like, okay, we're playing against Carey Price. Let's light him up, right? Right before the playoffs, I can't see how you can't get him ready within practice for that stuff. Ready for that. He knows what he's going into. He's been in the playoffs before. He'll be ready. I think it's kind of dumb.
I think it's fine for Price personally. I mean, Leafs did the same thing for Freddie Anderson. A goalie needs to get their timing back. But Gallagher, on the other hand, I'm not too sure about. Like, I think a forward can get their timing back a lot quicker, aka Kucherov. And Gallagher kind of plays like a really hard game. And I don't know if he did it down the AHL, but I'd hate for him. Like, I think it'd be easier for him to get injured, blocking a shot or getting a puck in the face or whatever, as opposed to, Carey Price with all that padding on.
Yeah, I think it was not the smartest move. I mean, if you're the Maple Leafs organization, couldn't you just tell one of your like farm defensemen, okay, first slap shot, get it high, make them scared a little bit? Like that would have to be a worry for me, because they are playing the Marlies, right? If they were playing like the Stockton Heat or something, I would be like, okay, whatever. They're playing the Flames farm team. There's nothing that's going to happen. But you're playing the Leafs farm team. You can't tell me, one of those players is going to take a shot or, maybe a little extracurricular. So
that's a decent
point, I don't know
point,
if it happened.
Actually.
Yeah, because the Leafs are dirty. Good point, Sanjay. Marlies. Question 3. Marc-Andre Fleury's playoff run here is now 14 straight postseasons. He has 142 games played, a 78-62 postseason record, 4,176 saves, 3 assists, 5 Stanley Cup appearances, and 3 Stanley Cup rings. Is he the greatest playoff goalie in this generation?
Oh, what's this generation?
For
sure. This generation will be everything
post-salary
after...
cap? Or like salary cap era?
I would say post Brodeur, like since Brodeur, Waugh, and even like, so probably since that group, right? Because you could say salary cap too if you really want.
Okay.
Your spin, you take it.
The answer is yes. He's gotten, like you said before, to the Stanley Cup Finals 5 different times. He's won with different teams in a different capacity 3 times. You can't say that like he's one of the greatest competitors and acrobatic goalies of this generation.
Yeah, it's got to be. I'm trying to think of other goalies who would be close, like Luongo or Lundqvist, but they just don't have the wins that Fleury does and Stanley Cup rings. It has to be Fleury.
Yeah, greatest playoff goalie of this generation, yes. Hall of Famer, yes. But I don't think I put him on my top 5 greatest goalies of all time. But I still think he's had a hell of a career. And the greatest playoff goalie of this generation, yes.
Really, who do you put behind him? It's Quick, Jonathan Quick, and Corey Crawford.
Luongo had some success. I mean, I know he didn't win a Stanley Cup, but he was there. Tim Thomas won the Stanley Cup. He was phenomenal for a brief period of time. Carey Price
was good.
Playoff goalie? No.
Well, you guys keep talking about how Carey Price is so good in the playoffs.
He's one of the best goalies.
Doesn't hold a game. Doesn't hold a flame.
Like he's been considered
you said who's
better than
behind him.
Marc-Andre Fleury for most of his career. Like, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
For the longest time, he was always Carey Price was always considered the best goalie, and still players when they're doing that yearly poll and they're voting who's the best goalie, they still vote Price.
It was interesting because I listened to the Las Vegas game on radio, and so I was listening to the Vegas local radio about it, and they were talking about whether Fleury should start game 2 or not. I was like, how do you have that discussion after that game? Like, he literally stood on his head. He made, like, the highlight reel is just ridiculous saves that he was making, and they're like, I think you have to have the discussion. No, you don't.
That's ridiculous. I mean, stupid. He wins the Vezina this year, right? I think we would all agree.
I would
Fleury.
hope so.
Close.
I think he deserves it.
Like, it'd be between him and Vasilevsky, but I think Vasilevsky's play kind of faltered near the end there, just enough to let Fleury take it.
Question 4, what team is most likely to cause an upset in the playoffs here?
Minnesota.
We talked about it. Yeah, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Ryan,
I'm going to say the Islanders.
Let me go someone else, I guess. I'll go St. Louis. That'd be a real upset.
Fancy. Question 5, if you could only bring back one retro reverse jersey for next year, which teams and why?
The Wild, because they were beautiful.
They really were. I really wanted one of those.
Same with the Arizona Coyotes.
I would say the Kings.
Yeah, Kings had a good one.
Kings were really nice.
And actually, you know what? I like the Habs one too. Even though I hate the Habs, I thought theirs was really sharp.
It did look sharp. I agree. Yeah. Sanjay, what's yours?
Blasty, man. You got to bring him back. Bring back the horse head. Let him ride. He's never made it to the playoffs, so let's see if we can change that.
I wonder why. It's like it's like this. Maybe he's cursed. Like,
he played one year. They used him. They did make the playoffs in 06. They used him, and he did make the playoffs. So I can put that to bed.
Maybe you put that horse to pasture.
Markstrom's setup with that jersey was one of the best goalie setups I've ever seen. Like, it is.
It was so nice.
It's just shades of McLean in Vancouver, but it was gorgeous. If your team goes far, which player will be the unknown star of your team? So, for example, like the Fernando Pisani, there was another player on Washington a few years ago who was not a very big name, but had like a great. Now, Sanjay, your team isn't in it, so you can audible for any American team that you want.
Well, I could do Winnipeg, right? Like or
a Canadian team. Sure. I was hoping you would go to an American team, but yeah, Winnipeg, sure. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Well, I was going to say Paul Stastny. I know he's kind of like a bigger name, but he's kind of forgotten and a veteran guy that I think if he has a tremendous playoff, really solidifies the Jets' depth in there and get a second line going, then I think that would be huge for them. So I think if he has a good playoffs, they'll win the first round.
Nice.
I'll go with Rasmus Sandin. He's Rasmus Sandin, the rookie for the Leafs. Missed most of the year because of playoffs and cap reasons as well. Couldn't get into the lineup. But the time that he has played, he's looked phenomenal. And the last I saw, he's going to play on power play 1 in the playoffs, knocking Riley off that top power play. So if he can get that power play going, he'll be a legend for the Leafs.
I didn't realize he was a shooting winger.
No, what the Leafs need is a scoring threat from the point. That is their biggest issue with their power play, because what everyone does is collapse in front of the net and let the defenseman just have the puck at the top, and they know that there's no danger there with Riley. He's just going to pass it.
Adam?
I'm going to go with the real deal, James Neal. I think that now that he's found his legs, he started producing a bit on that third line. And that's kind of become a bit of a scary line that's starting to fill out the Oilers lineup with Ryan McLeod, the rookie centering, veterans Alex Chiasson and the real deal. So I really think he's hungry, and I think he could go on a bit of a run.
Sweet. All right, well, that brings this question period to an end. In fact, it actually brings this episode to an end. So like, click, subscribe. Feel free to comment. I see most of the people assume Sanjay is a Oiler fan and that we hate the Jets.
I don't get that.
We do not hate the Jets.
You're all
we just think
homers.
that they're in for a bad spot. Oh, there's definitely that part of it. We are homers for sure. But if you want, you can make your own podcast and talk about how awesome we are. So whatever. Anyways, like, click, subscribe. Thank you for the comments. Even though most of you hate Sanjay for some reason, I don't know why. I mean, I understand it, but I don't.
Haven't
know
I
why.
suffered enough this year? Like, we could have done this podcast last year or 2 years ago. You bring me in for the 1 year they missed the playoffs, and you guys make it. So
It was a great time to start for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's good. You
Nowhere
got
to go
your,
but up.
Yeah,
Exactly.
When we brought Pilon in, I think like it was the worst year for the Leafs. It was like Babcock's first year, wasn't it?
Mm.
Oh,
What was like when I was coming in guest appearances like a couple
Yeah.
years ago? Yeah. I was pissed
Maybe.
I remember being pissed at Babcock, so yeah, probably.
You can cheer for the U of S Huskies now and feel better about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. Yeah, whether you like Sanjay or not. Sorry. Like, click, subscribe. And with that, I'm Baron.
I'm Adam.
I'm Ryan, not Sanjay. Love me.
And I'm cheering for the Jets.
Oh man, so good.